All right, why don't we get started? Welcome to you all to the Monday, September 17th, 2018 work session of the Falls Church City Council. We are delighted. Staff is here with us this evening. Had a busy weekend. Taste of Falls Church, Fall Festival, Race for the Schools. And I don't think I'm telling any secrets from yesterday's race. I think you probably all know by now that I took second in the fun run race. I was in the 80-plus age bracket, but I was very proud of that. Yeah, that's right. Anyway, a good, nice weekend. Congratulations, Mr. Shields and Ms. Vester, on a lot of great staff organization, and really nice weekend for everybody. Yeah, of course.
I haven't yet seen who is the winner of the Taste of Falls Church. I saw Chris McGow was the winner of the race. So, big win for Chris McGow this month.
That's right.
But who were the winners?
El Patron. El Patron won best taste, and then the Kensington won best menu.
Oh, okay.
So a lot of great restaurants. I got to tell you, the food was awesome. So, but anyway, they did a great job. It's good too. Both new businesses are new arrivals in the city.
Yeah.
So pretty exciting.
And it was packed.
It was packed.
I don't know if this is on, but it was, when I stood there and was greeting people, it was just miles and miles of people, which was great. It was well attended and well run, and so congrats to all the staff that worked really hard to make that happen, especially not knowing what the weather was going to be like.
Well, thank you for that, and thanks everybody who came. I think it was record turnout. And so hopefully it was good publicity for our city restaurants who participated. They put a lot of work into it as well, and good publicity, and I know they spread a lot of happiness with their offerings. But yeah, it is a big staff effort, so appreciate that comment. I'll relay that. While we're getting organized for the financial condition report, I will just note that tonight we are under a flood watch, and we're also under a tornado watch. And so we've been publicizing that through our normal channels, but we will just keep an eye on the weather as we're going through this. With the flooding in particular, we know that citizens who experienced flooding in August and then again in the Labor Day weekend, we've experienced just a tremendous amount of rain. We had some intense rain today as well. Luckily, the duration of the rain events today, while they were intense, were typically about maybe 5 to 10 minutes long, and we didn't have any reports of flooding that I'm aware of right now. We did have staff out in the neighborhoods, just observing the situation and just making sure that things were okay. And if we can get through tonight, hopefully we'll have some sunny weather coming in behind this system. We are working with the Broadmont neighborhood in particular to address a couple of concerns that were raised in a neighborhood meeting about the flooding that occurred there. And we'll be getting an update out to the neighborhood this week on the bridge hydrological study. That's going to take a little bit of time, but we'll give people just an update as to what the schedule for that will be, and then updates on our 2 capital projects that we have planned for the Broadmont neighborhood. And get that information out and just provide continuous updates. On 26th Street, where we've had a new home built in an area where we've traditionally had some flooding issues, we've really tried to focus in on a potential backflow problem coming out of our storm system right on the WNOD. We're going to install a backflow preventer at that location, and then monitor it very closely to make sure it's working as we hope it will, to minimize some of the issues that the new homes have experienced there. The expected installation is on October, the first week of October is when we plan to install that device, and then we'll monitor it after that. So that's just a few updates, and then I'll just note that for our colleagues in North Carolina, this has really been an event of a lifetime. I actually have a personal friend who's works in public works for the city of Wilmington, and this is just an incredible event that they're dealing with, and so all of our sympathy and thoughts go to our friends and colleagues and family members in North Carolina.
All right. Well, thanks very much. Why don't I move on to the order of business, first order of business?
Okay. So Ms. Bawa is going to give her presentation tonight. I'll just say a few words. What this tonight's presentation is a look backwards in terms of how we did in FY18, which ended on June 30th. As you know, we still have accounts payable and accounts receivable that go all the way through August, and so that's why it's in September when we give you the year-end financial report. The numbers we'll present tonight, as Karen will say, are unaudited. They may change a little bit as the auditors do their final review and give you their report, which will be in December. But the purpose of tonight's presentation is to first discuss, well, how did we do for FY18? What were the results of operations? What does that mean for FY19? This is 6 months more data that allows us to assess, are we in any trouble for FY19? The answer is no. We think we're in solid shape for the current fiscal year. And then we'll take the opportunity to look at the data that we have just to discuss the trends for revenues and their component parts and the trends on expenses and their component parts. And so I want to thank Ms. Bawa. She always presents this very clearly, and she did a run-through with her directors this morning. We really want people to have good financial literacy in the city, so hopefully this will be helpful for that. We'll try to get this information out so people have it. We look forward to your questions and discussion. I guess one last note is this is a setup also for November when we'll meet with the school board when we really just look ahead at FY20 budget development. We haven't set a date for that, but that's typically in the late November, early December timeframe. And the Budget and Finance Committee is working to help get that set up as well. So thank you. Ms. Bawa.
Good evening, Mayor Tarter and members of the council. We have for you fiscal year 2018 results as of June 30th, 2018. And as Mr. Shields mentioned, we'll look at these results, then we'll compare them with our... It's on. Is that better? Yes. Okay. We'll look at the results for last fiscal year that just ended in June and then compare it to our projections since the budget. It's been over almost 5 months, so a quick look in alignment with what we set as our targets and what the next steps would be as we move on to the next year's budget development. So on slide number 3, the fiscal year 18 results of the city's operations. The city ended the year with a net $762,183 savings to the general fund, to the unassigned fund balance, which is 0.2% of the total budget size. Looking at the top section, it displays the general fund revenues that came in above budget by $563,000 almost, which is 0.6% of the total budget. This was primarily due to better than anticipated personal property tax, which was 7% over budget, 9.1% year-over-year increase. Meals taxes, which was 8% over budget for fiscal year 18, and sales taxes 4% over the budget. And other taxes, which include cigarette tax, utility tax, a recordation tax, and bank stock fees, was 5% over budget. These increases were offset by building permit revenues that came in below budget by roughly 15%, as we had projected that at the third quarter due to the delay in some capital projects. But it still saw an increase of 22% year over year over 2017, the building permits. I wanted to point that out. The next section below that is the expenditures, which show an underspending of $199,247, which is 0.5% of the expenditure budget, which was primarily due to the underspending of 2 grants, the bike share operations and the TDM grant. And some savings were also realized from staff turnover and vacancies in various departments. So this all results in a net increase of $762,183 to the unassigned fund balance, to the positive. The next slide 4, this chart shows general fund year-end performance for the last 12 years. The blue line on top is the operating revenues, and the bars together add up to the operating expenditures, the red piece being the general government, and the green piece being the school board transfer, and the purple bars on top is the debt service. So that shows that in most of the years we have ended with a saving except for fiscal year 8 through 10. And at some point those years will move along and won't show up in the chart when we move on, but just wanted to point that out since it still fits. So, the next chart shows the fiscal year 2018 revenue and expenditures have resulted in a 17.9% unassigned fund balance at 16.1 million. That is the 2018 blue bar. The green and the red lines show the floor and the target of the financial policy as we have currently, with a fund threshold of 12% for the floor, the green, and the 17% as the target that we have tried to maintain so far. So this brings us to a balance of 17.9%. Slide number 6. This chart shows a closer look of the key economic indicators that make up roughly 25% of our budget. Sure.
Just on that unassigned fund balance,
Yeah.
is that what we budgeted, 17.8%?
Well,
Or does that include the surplus?
the beginning year, this includes the 763. The beginning balance was at 17.6 when we ended the last year. So whenever we finish the year, we look at our balances.
Okay.
So after adding this amount, we come to a 16.1 million total.
Okay,
which is
but that is the $762,000. It's not an extra other 0.8%.
I'm sorry, what was the raw number?
4.
14.4 million.
Raw number 4.
Unassigned fund balance.
16.1
Oh, sorry,
million.
16.
Ending, yes.
And that's 17.9%.
But we did lay it out in the memo that staff recommendation is to, given the large school library and city hall projects, the staff recommends that these funds be held in the capital reserve as the surplus, the 762,000, as we embark on the next 2 tranches of debt issuance and the projects play out.
So then what would if we moved all that into the capital reserves, then our unassigned fund balance would go back down to 17%?
17.6 we were at.
It would be at 17.6, okay.
While we're asking questions, sorry, I was saving mine for the end. I know that when we were adopted the new policy, we were looking at a different balance. We were looking at, what do we call that one?
Current available balance.
Current available balance. How do we look on that metric?
So, yeah, so on that, we are still over 30% as of now. However, the intention of that policy is that when the debt service exceeds 12% of our total expenditures, then that kicks in, and we should, with a floor of 15% and a target of 20%, with the current available balance, which includes the unassigned and the capital reserve and the permit.
We expect to exceed that debt ratio this coming spring, right?
Yes, in 21
Okay.
is when we expect to exceed it.
So when we look, I looked ahead in the presentation. When we look ahead at kind of what projections look like, I'd like to see what that available balance number looks like.
Yeah, so when we come back with our revenue forecasts for fiscal year 20 project, and then the 5-year forecast, that's when we'll bring you a look of the total
Okay.
current available balance and the projections and how.
Could I add just one
Sure.
point to that? So that also is going to be really informed by the proposals that we've received, because those payments for the land are the main contributors to our available fund balance and part of our strategy for how we finance the school. So when we were putting this chart together, we have projected it out, but we've projected it out based on the way we modeled it. But that's very quickly getting overtaken by events. So our thought was, let's wait until we actually have the ability to discuss the proposals and how they will fit in, with those fiscal policies. And we'll be able to do that very soon as we move along in that process.
Moving along to slide number 6, that shows a closer look of our key economic indicators, some of the other taxes other than the real estate tax base. That these roughly make up for about 25% of our budget. The first column shows the actual for fiscal year 18 for personal property tax, for example, came in a little over 6 million. And fiscal year 19 adopted budget includes a 3% increase that we need to realize at 6.278 million. So the growth needed to meet this is 3% for personal property for fiscal year 19.
Just ask a question. As I was looking at these numbers for personal property tax, is that due to, I know that there's been a concerted effort within the city to make sure that we have additional registration for cars. Where does that get thrown into the mix?
That's in here, and this also includes the personal real property that businesses have that
Okay.
they pay on. So that's the one that will see some depreciation with all the businesses that came to Harris Teeter and some of the others that came
Right.
2 or 3 years ago. So they'll start seeing more depreciation. Even we may add cars, but it may get offset.
Do you think that there's an overall trend here? Because I look at BPOL and look at personal property tax, and at least in my world, that's usually an indication that you've got new businesses arriving, businesses thriving, higher revenues, buying additional equipment, turning over old equipment.
Mm-hmm.
Is that what you're finding in these numbers as well, that that's an indication of kind of a healthier business environment here in the city?
Well, we'll have a better estimate on the first quarter for 19, and from what I've seen so far, we have added some cars for the year from what we have sent, the bills. We have added roughly 90 cars. However, we've seen a larger depreciation that offsets, so it may not see the 9% growth that we have seen in personal property tax since 2017 to 2008. The next few charts will show that we've seen a 9.1% growth. We may not be able to sustain that growth for the
Okay.
next year.
But the point is well taken. The reason we focus on these 5 is because they are our best indicators of economic activity in the city.
And we see
They're kind
downward
of leading
movement.
indicators.
Right, it'll tell us a better idea of how economically, what information we're getting, how we should budget for the next.
Yeah, I would just say, for me, that's, to me, that's optimism in terms of the economic kind of vitality of the city, right? Because if you see those types of increases in BPOL and personal property tax, it's usually an indication that you've got a healthier business environment. You've got more folks, again, that are adding equipment, turning over old equipment. I know some of it is driven by cars, but generally speaking, when you look at a business and you turn the real estate upside down, everything that falls out, right, it's going to be the personal property. And usually when you see an increase in folks buying additional equipment, again, turning over the old equipment, and then you look at BPOL, which is really the gross receipts portion of the businesses themselves, those two together, for me, tell me if that is a leading indicator that we are looking at a pretty healthy business environment here.
So when we look at each of these in the next few slides, you'll notice that the BPOL has seen better larger year average growth than the shorter years. So it's not always that it's going to grow year over year.
Yeah.
So 10-year and 7-year averages are better than the 3-year averages. And that could be partly because of some of the large construction projects that aren't always there in every single year. So that can tip the.
So follow up on that, because I actually had similar questions on these kind of local taxes. So when I read this, especially when we look at FY19, we're doing pretty well on the consumer side. So personal property, sales, mails, everyday Joe's on the streets going out and spending money.
Mm-hmm.
I'm actually concerned about BPOL because we haven't seen as healthy growth.
Exactly.
It looks like we need nearly 7% growth to hit our numbers for FY19.
Exactly.
While overall the local, taxes were doing better, 4% over expectations from last year. I'm kind of concerned about BPOL growing nearly 7% because I don't think we've seen that in a while. And so do we have concerns actually on the business side of things, given that's where most of that revenue comes from? While consumers are doing okay, our businesses are actually feeling the pinch a little earlier. So that's where I actually didn't know whether staff had any thoughts on that when you actually break down one more level beyond the local taxes. Do you have any thoughts on?
That's what we want to get into, at least when we do the first quarter results, and look closer into what is driving and see if fiscal year 19 trend is also along the lines of what we saw in 18, and then delve into why.
Yep. And if we don't think we're going to hit, I guess, 6.7% growth to hit the FY19 numbers.
These numbers make more meaning because the deadline for business license is March 1st. Still, we get a good idea
Yeah.
of how the sales are getting.
Yeah, I think in your memo, you kind of thought that it seemed pretty reasonable for us to kind of, because overall, we only have to grow revenues by 1.8%, I think, is what you said, to hit our FY19 numbers, which is great. It means we're doing well in a bunch of categories. But, if BPOL is the outlier, that's going to pull us down. We should probably keep an eye on that, too.
And it's not all just retail. There's a lot on like professional services and contracts that's the larger part of this. The retail is only 25% of this.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
So overall local taxes, we need to, in order to meet our budget target for fiscal year 19, we need to realize a growth of 1.8% across these 5 categories. So a closer look at the personal property tax on page 7, or slide 7, sorry. So fiscal year 18, before I go there, the red line is the actual 2018 actual performance, and the blue line is the fiscal year 19 budget. And comparing those, the red line, the last 2 points on the red line, the fiscal year 18 came over fiscal year 17 by 9.1%, as I mentioned earlier. And a comparison of the last red point and the last blue point is growth that we need to realize, which is 3% to meet our fiscal year 19 budget target. And for this, the 3-year average was 9.5%, 5-year average was 7.1%, and the 10-year average was 6.4%. So we have certainly done better in the recent past, but again, the 10-year average keeps us in check of the big picture. So I just put that number out there. So I'll move along. Okay, so sales tax, slide 8. Fiscal year 18 again saw on this, the growth is not as aggressive as the personal property. We saw a 2.2% increase, year-over-year increase over 2017. And we are pretty close to if we were to collect at the same rate as fiscal year 18, we are pretty close to our target of the 19 budget, 0.8, roughly 1% needed to meet that target. 3-year average has been 5.6%, and dropping to 3.9% as a 7-year average for this category. And we do tend to see that the last quarter brings in, this year again, May and June have brought in better sales tax, and that's why we see the discrepancy between the 3rd quarter projections and the 4th quarter results.
I think I've asked this before, and I'm pretty sure I know the answer that's confidential, but are we able to attribute sales and meals tax to kind of newer businesses and be able to separate them out and know kind of what impact of existing businesses versus new ones that opened in the past year?
I think what we would just say is you see the step up in 2017. That is, because of new businesses. Budgeted for it, we anticipated it. The question has been, do some of these new businesses take from existing businesses? Tells us is, no, it actually grew.
Okay.
Next, over to meals tax, slide 9. This is seeing since 2016, kind of a steady growth. Fiscal year 18 actual performance is 5.7% above the fiscal year 17 actuals, which is pretty decent, and close to the 3-year average of 5.8%. These collections already exceed the fiscal year 19 budget. if we were to collect at last year's rate, we've pretty much met our fiscal year 19 budget target. But again, the 7-year average, those are reminders that, you know, should any economic, these being economic indicators, if anything in the big picture moves, this is going to see some shifts. So those numbers. Business license.
Sorry, going back to meals tax, kind of somewhat related. Is our 4% meals tax at the maximum rate allowed by the General Assembly already?
No, it's 5% as much.
Oh, 5%. That's the maximum?
Yes.
Okay.
We're at 4.
Does it require General Assembly action should we choose to go above 4? Or are we allowed to kind of play within whatever, as long as it's below 5?
Check with the attorney, but I think the 5 is allowed, and beyond that, there might just be a petition kind of a process, but I don't know.
Thanks.
Business license on slide 10. If you see like 17 to 18, it's a gradual growth, not as steady as some of the others that we had seen, steeper. It's a 1.3% growth over fiscal year 17. And as mentioned earlier, we need to realize a 6.7% growth to meet our 19 budget. So this is one category that need to step up on this year and see how it comes along with the sales as they move along, and then the professional services. The 3, 5, and 7-year averages have all along been in the 3 to 4% range over there. The last one, other taxes, which include the cigarette tax, the consumer utility tax, the bank stock fees, and the recordation tax, has seen a 6.6% growth over fiscal year 17, which is above any of the averages that you see below. And we have, at that rate of fiscal year 18 performance, we have already met our, if we were to collect that, we have met our fiscal year 19 budget target. The 3, 5, and 7-year averages are somewhere between 2.5% to 2%. So this is another field we have seen a lot of activity in the cigarette tax. It's like volatile, very volatile. And bank fees came in about 66,000 more than what we had anticipated. So it's like personal property on your bank balances that you get charged. So there were higher balances, so we got more fees that way. So we did well. The next 2 slides show the expenditure trends for general government operation. A quick look of what these bars mean. The bars include the red piece, which is the miscellaneous general government expenses, and the green piece on top is the interjurisdictional agreements that we pay for various contracts. And the purple bar, the sliver on top, is the transportation, WMATA transportation-related expenses that you see have grown over the years. And the blue bar, the blue line is the personnel expenses fully loaded as a portion of the total expenditures, which is the red piece. So the overall operations have remained stable. I would say the personnel expenditures also pretty stable, have not seen much growth in the last 4 years. And WMATA definitely is increasing, and we'll have in our 5-year projections where they're headed.
Before you leave that chart, how do you reconcile the salary increases that we experience in the cost of personnel every year?
Yes, so the reduction in the retirement and the the health benefits has offset those increases for us. And that'll be clear in the next following chart, which breaks the salaries and benefits.
Oh, perfect tee up.
Good segue. So we have realized that 3% or whatever the increases were for this year and the year before and the one prior to that. However, you see the red piece is the retirement, and our annual contribution rates have dropped this year.
Well, keep up the good work.
Investment, the retirement board has been doing good work with their investment strategy, but all good things do come to an end, and so, but it's been
Yeah.
7 years, I guess, of pretty good returns for the pension fund.
Yeah, we can't lose sight of the other side of the coin. That's all I want to say. So. And health benefits also, we did have the non-Kaiser increase, but the Kaiser decreases kind of offset that. However, I think the indication is that at some point even Kaiser expenses are going to move along upwards, and we may see an overall increase in health benefits in the next couple of years. So, slide number 14 shows expenditure trends for the general government and school transfers. So general government has seen a 32% increase in the last 10 years from 2010 to 2019 projected. And a school transfer has seen a 44% increase over that time frame. So looking at slide number 16, the prior year averages. This is something we do in preparation for our 5-year projections that we bring to council when we do the budget development. For the school transfer, the seat enrollment, general government operations, and then a revenue growth and organic revenue growth. So you'll see the school transfer has grown 3.7% as in the small window, 3-year average, and a little bit higher in the 5 and 7 year, but the 10-year average is again 3.5%. The seat enrollment has been in the 3% plus range. The general government has done better in the last few years, and this is supported by the total operational costs that we have seen and the salaries and health benefits and others that we have stayed stable in the shorter window. And the 5 years and 7 years tend to be higher because these are the years that showed more growth to make up for what we lost during the economic downturn. So those tend to be a little bit higher. And the 10-year is 1.7%. So now organic revenue growth, which is net of tax increases, is better for the 3-year window, better than what we saw last year because of this 2018, and then 2015 was 1 year that was the down year, so this is the average that kind of moved along. Going forward, when we do the projections, I think 5-year would be the better way of looking at, because when we do the forecast, we do not project an economic downturn, but it's good to see realized modest increases when we do our 5-year annual projections. And these numbers exclude any general government grants and all that stuff.
So I have a question, and if you want to answer this at the end, that's fine. But I was thinking earlier today just about our modeling for tax revenue in light of the 10-acre development. And I was having a conversation with a contact of mine in Loudoun County. We were talking about data center development. Not that we expect to be a farm of data centers at the 10-acre site. We were talking about the direct and indirect revenue to Loudoun County for every 300,000 square feet of data centers. It's about $10 million a year. Just given the amount of equipment that they turn over, the amount of gross receipts coming in for the tenants at these co-location facilities. As we kind of continue down the path of the 10-acre site and we think about potential tenants and uses that we may not have seen in the city to date that could dramatically impact some of these revenues, I mean, at what point do we sit down and think about, refining some of the revenue models for some of the businesses that we may see, crop up at that 10-acre site that, again, may be a bit of an anomaly?
Yeah, and that's, to me, that's a longer window.
Mm-hmm.
Because by the time we start realizing some revenues, steady revenues from it, we're talking in
2023, 2024,
exactly,
sure.
we're talking at
Yep.
least 5-year plus window. So when we see, I think in the next couple of years, when we start doing our projections, those numbers should factor.
Where do we see most of our revenue picked up? I mean, aside from the permitting and the actual kind of early pre-phase construction process on new development, where do we see most of that revenue as part of the construction process hit these particular line items? People, personal property tax, obviously real property tax. Disproportionately, I would say, for new construction, where would you see most of that revenue for a
Depending on
large
what is
project
getting
picked up?
constructed, so, you know, if it's businesses, then sales tax also,
Mhm.
and all property-related taxes.
Is there one, so if you think about the early phases of a construction project, and we think about 1.5 million square feet, which one of these line items from a revenue perspective would you say is most susceptible to a huge spike being derived from taxes generated off of that new construction? Make sense? Which one's going to be most impacted by new construction?
I could jump in.
Sure.
Well, the one that is the most immediate is permits. And they're significant. I mean, for Founders Row, just an example, it's about $1 million in building permit fees. The other one that is comes online quickly is B-Pole. So they come in and for all the contracts that are, let's say it's a $100 million project, then there's business licenses for all of that construction activity. So that's in year one. The property taxes, they really kind of ramp up a little bit more slowly. So for the Founders Row, or for 301 West Broad and Lincoln, just as an example, maybe 10% in the first year, then it maybe another 50%, and then at year 3 you're getting at about 80%, and then it's when it stabilizes is when you get through the last chunks of it. That ramps up kind of over like about a 5-year phase for those big multi-use mixed-use projects.
It's interesting, and it's an exercise that kind of enjoy going through just to think about the phasing of projects, what's being proposed, and when, and how that may impact things. And I'm sure you guys are thinking about that. And of course, it is a very long kind of time frame. But for me, it's something that I want to watch closely, because as we consider portions of this project and you start to get into the community engagement with some of the development, you think about the types of businesses that we're attracting, and there's a lot of conversation about technology and innovation, and you think about the types of businesses attracted to the city. I mean, that can drastically impact some of these revenue line items that normally seem to be kind of on an even escalation, where you could see, I don't want to say windfall because I don't want that to be picked up in the news press, but you may see some huge spikes in potential revenue. He's writing it down, windfall. Where you may see some significant increases in revenue line items that we may otherwise not have seen outside of the context of a normal kind of commercial development. So anyway, that's going to be in the news press.
Could I perhaps you'll be discussing this in the next slide, but I just want to not leave slide number 15 without understanding what I think I heard you say, which is that your projection for organic revenue growth in the upcoming fiscal year is going to be somewhere around the 5-year average of 3.2%.
That's correct.
So that tells me that as we sit here, in the middle of September, the manager and the school superintendent are needing to begin to set a level of expectation that the growth in their budget should be, budget asks should be in the 3.2% range. Is that what you're telling me?
Well, before we go there, we need to look at how we address the debt service, because the debt service is ramping up with the construction.
I see,
and the
okay.
new bond, and then we'll address the WMATA transportation
Okay, so
increases. and
presumably
then
it's no
the
more.
net revenue increase would be split up, and it should be somewhere in the 3 range, or high 2 range, but exactly where we'll bring it to you.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
why don't you keep talking then, because thanks.
So after Ross's kind of glass half full, I actually have a glass half empty question.
Sure.
And maybe I'm missing a slide, but when I reviewed the deck online, I was looking at slide 17, which I think Wyatt said that we were going to update this, but it essentially shows our debt for the next 5 or 6 years. Is that the one that we're going to update based on the proposals we received? This is the version that is online.
So that's the one that.
It didn't make it in the
No,
final.
it didn't.
Yeah, we
Okay.
did a look at that, and there were a couple things, particularly on the debt service and WMATA assumptions, that we needed to work on a little bit more. We think that that's probably the more of a November discussion than a tonight discussion. There are
Got it.
just some things that probably need to.
Okay, so I'll hold my more pessimistic questions. But I did note that it looks like it was estimating a 3% revenue growth for FY 2020. That was what I think Phil just asked too.
Right, the net. But if you see the first line, that's at 3.2%.
You went to
Yeah.
okay.
The net after addressing the
Okay,
The debt
I'll
service,
hold my
yeah.
questions for a couple months
later.
Thank you.
It's never too early.
So with that, the next steps is, there is to schedule the joint board meeting with the school board and city council as we look at the revenue projections and their needs and ours as we move into the next fiscal year planning. And look at the budget calendar that we'll present in the upcoming meetings. The first quarter results for fiscal year 19 will be brought in late October. And then we'll seek council budget guidance in the December meeting. That concludes my presentation.
Could I, nice effort. Thank you. I didn't see a chart on real estate taxes over time. Is there a reason why that's not in this chart here, in this set of charts?
So those, like overall year over year, it's a 4.5% growth. However, we bring that to you in November when we bring the breakdown of the commercial, the residential, and the construction piece, how we are looking at the year and how
We
when
had
we
key
send the
revenue
bills.
trends for all the taxes but real estate taxes.
So
And
that's,
yet
yeah,
we
those are
know-
more stable for us, since we send, the assessed value of the properties as they grow, right? And these are indicators that are
Right.
more dependent on the economic situation out there, although we do see a drop in assessments, but they're not as volatile as some of these.
Well, it would be very helpful for me to see a similar chart for
For that,
real estate
sure.
taxes.
Okay, we can include it.
And what percentage of our overall tax revenues are real estate related?
About half.
About half?
Yes.
It seemed to me it was a lot larger than that. If we're down to about half, then we're down from 60% to around half. Is that where we are?
Yeah, it's about 59%, I think, close to 60%.
So close to 60%. And so I think the lesson from that, because a lot of the real estate taxes are based upon the quality of the schools, the lesson there is we need to associate the schools not only as an expense, but as a major supporter of 60% of our tax revenues. Thank you.
I'm just calculating the percentage.
Ms. Bawa, on the handout, the memo,
Uh-huh.
just have a question on page 1 of 3. And then a question on 2 of 3 also.
Yes.
The real estate property taxes that we took in last year, there were some people that prepaid, right?
Yes.
That's not counted in here, is it?
It's not- we-
That's all
yeah, we-
amortized?
Yes,
Okay.
it is. And actually, even the personal property, people prepaid, so that's segregated out.
Okay.
We've only used what was applicable for fiscal year 18 towards this.
Okay, very good.
So,
And-
I'm sorry.
go ahead.
Can I just, so did you say, I just want to clarify, the taxes that were prepaid, are those included or not included? So what is the amount of that? Do we know? We must
For
know.
$1 million, if I remember.
Oh,
correct.
just $1 million or so? But still, that's,
Yeah,
you
I
know,
mean,
percent and a
throw the
half or percent and a
percentages out,
quarter.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Well, I think we should account for it, in some fashion.
And it'll be accounted for in the years that they're applicable for.
Well, that would be
So-
this year, wouldn't it? I mean, if we
Exactly.
prepaid, it should come in
Right.
this, okay. All right.
Well, just to clarify, if someone prepaid next year's taxes, it wouldn't show in the results in operations for for the year that we're talking about here.
So if someone prepaid their taxes December 28th because they wanted to get in a deductibility over $10,000, that amount is going to be applied towards this year's tax. The tax will be due this year. And so I'm just trying to figure out if that throws off our numbers any.
We do it so it doesn't throw
Doesn't.
off the numbers.
Okay, so these numbers are not askew
So
because
it's
of that.
comparing the fiscal year 18 budget and a fiscal year 18 actuals only for the taxes that were due for 18.
Okay.
Anything that they prepaid for 19 will be accounted for in the 19, when we look at the 19 performance.
So you're just holding in abeyance and basically in some separate account?
Right.
Okay, sorry.
And then on page 2 of 3, just had a hard time understanding this last chart.
It's the same as slide, Cindy, can you pull up that slide?
Just the last 3 columns.
6.
Comparison of fiscal year 2018 to fiscal year 2017.
It's
The
compared to
incre-
19. Am I?
Oh, are you
am I-
looking at?
I'm
which page are
looking
you
at page
looking
2 of 3.
Right, and the second table?
The second table, it just has really high percentages that it didn't make sense to me. Does that make sense to anybody?
It's
This chart right here.
slide 6.
Oh.
Oh.
It's not slide 6,
Oh,
it's
the
page 2 of 3 in the memo.
Attachments, okay.
Sorry.
Are you, expenditures or revenues?
It's the expenditures page,
Okay,
so we're comparing 2018 to 2017.
yes.
And then the percentage increase in expenditures is way out of whack to what it seems like we're actually spending.
But if you look at the comparison of the budget, we did have higher underspending last year. However, this is also within budget. If you recall, last year we had a underspending of close to, I don't want to say a number that I'm not sure of, but I know it was higher than 199,000.
I think what she's saying is all these percentages look really big,
Yeah.
37,000%.
and I think that
Oh, it might just be a formula then.
Okay.
Yeah, this is too high.
Doesn't
Right.
seem like a real
Yeah.
number.
That's showing,
Yeah, I'll look into that.
It's showing the difference as a percentage of the actual.
and it's actually meant to be a.
So like 408, 354 is 64.89% of 629, so that's just a formula.
Yeah, it's probably a formula.
But
Okay.
Vice Mayor, isn't your point that the actuals seem abnormal as well on the 17?
Yeah, it just all seemed, everything seems a little off, so maybe you want to check that chart. Like, just the difference in
That column,
public
yeah,
safety expenses between the 2 years is really big.
Right,
Yeah, we should have caught that.
Okay,
yeah.
thank you.
37% overspending. Entirely helps.
So as we, yeah, they're a good example, as we wade through these deep numbers, I'm trying to do a version of this that's, somebody jumps out in a dark alley and asks me what all this means. So let me try this and see if you agree with it. So this council's strategy of mixed use and other economic development, pursuing that, plus ambitious investments in capital infrastructure on the schools and city side, along with a modest increase in the tax rate, has put us in a position, as these numbers show, that is stronger than even when we got the gold stars from the rating agencies last spring. That would be how I would try to explain where we are to somebody who didn't want to read through all these charts. My concerns, some have already been expressed, but my first concern is that underspending on either side, either schools or city, is, I guess not a bad thing. You can't criticize underspending, but to some degree, sustained underspending, particularly on the city side, needs to be avoided because presumably the council sets a budget and expects positions to be filled and jobs to be done, and we don't want to be in a chronic condition of underspending because we are short of personnel positions that we believe that we thought were necessary. And I know there are good reasons that certain positions were not filled, but going forward we should try to make sure we are filling those positions if we think that they are necessary. And the second point of 3 is what was discussed there earlier, which is there's a level of expectation that's been created over the last 7 years because of the robust economic growth that we are going to roll along at 6 or 6.5 or more than 6.5% economic growth every year, and our budget's going to be able to increase accordingly. And the question is, and you're going to tell us about this either now or maybe in November, is when do we begin to plan for the downturn in the economic cycle? When do we begin to make sure that people's expectations are not overly extravagant when it comes to what kind of money we're actually going to be able to bring in? We've got very exciting things coming online, Founders Row, hopefully Broad in Washington, Upper West Side. All those things, are, well, the big money is going to be at least 3 or 4 years down the line for any of those. So we need to make people aware of that. And then
I would like to say that I was at the National League of Cities discussion in DC later last week, and there was a discussion about how the cities are planning and what they're looking at for the economic downturn for the next recession. And there are cities in the nation, patches, regions that have started seeing that the revenue growths are not as robust. The unemployment numbers, the wages are getting stagnant, the political will to not increase taxes. There are a lot of factors, the housing market. So they're already seeing that the revenues or increased growth is decelerating, and the growth in expenditures is higher than the growth in revenues, which we have seen over the years with the various medical and, the benefits and the retirement. However, we've been a little different here with the, offset in the retirement contributions and the health benefits. So random indications from various agencies. However, cities and counties across the nation have started, since the 2008 downturn, they've started building some or the other kind of reserves, rainy days reserves or other reserves, to pad them for such situations that will come. And, we all know it's expected to come every 8 years or 9 years, and we're 10th year of recovery. So nobody knows exactly when a downturn is expected, but it's soon, it's overdue. When it'll be and how long it's going to stay, all that remains to be seen. And then I'm going to be in at another economic discussion next week, so I hope we'll have some more.
Okay, well, that's, without being alarmist or negative, which I am neither, as everybody knows, that is, I think, a prudent thing to keep on our radar screen. We really enjoyed a perfect storm of happiness over the last multiple number of years now. We've got good performance in the market has helped us on the retirement. Health costs have, stabilized. Apparently, economic growth, as we've seen, because we've leaned forward into that, has been robust. It has been a happy time in the Valley. And, we're pushing to keep it happy. But, we have to be aware that it can't be probably happy forever through no control of our own. Thank you for that. The only last point is, the amount of the surplus, $760-some thousand, is as a percentage of the overall city budget, not anything unusual. However, as we all know here in Littleville, that is about the amount of money that we slash each other's throats over every budget cycle. In the spring, a penny and a half, a couple of pennies on the tax rate. Maybe there's just some inevitability to that. Certainly when the economy's going well, we'd rather be 760 to the good than 760 the other way. So it's not as stressful as it might be. But I think it is worth remembering that the taxpayer is the one person who does not get respite in the scenario as it unfolds here. We end up with pretty robust real estate assessment growth and with an increase in the tax rate. And I would just hope as we move forward that we keep in mind that, it's helpful to try to take the taxpayers' considerations into heart too, as well as all the needs for the cities and the schools as we do, because we consistently have, over the years that I've been on council, been able to show surpluses even as we increase the tax rate. And that's, you know, not the preferred route for my money. The only other thought is, and the Budget and Finance Committee's talked about this some already, if you're going to tell the manager and the superintendent that they've got about 3% that they can plan on, you know, what I heard, you know, from the Budget and Finance meeting that I went to was on the school side, you know, they they believe in their mission so strongly that they feel that, you know, 3% is not getting the job done. It's not providing the instructional quality or the salary enhancements that they feel are necessary. So the gap between, you know, the 3% that we may be able to afford at the current tax rate and the 5% or so that the schools want is why we're all here. But the earlier that we can message that to everybody, to the schools, to the public, newspaper, I think the better we are off when we get into the spring and we are, you know, slashing each other's throats over a penny and a half or so, because we are probably going to keep doing that as long as the expectations are that we just need to spend more on public education here than natural organic growth is going to deliver to us to spend.
To your earlier comment about the fund balance and the 762 adding to it, I'd like to say that in the previous years where surpluses have been realized, the council has appropriated some of those monies for one-time capital projects and needs that the city has. However, last year and this year, we have proposed to keep it in the reserve in light of the huge construction debt issuance that's upcoming for the, you know, all the three projects, the big projects that are moving along. So that's why the recommendation has been to, and for that we revised our fiscal policy and the whole works.
So two things. One, I'm determined not to end up in the spring slashing each other's throats. Determined. I think we've had some good progress in the Budget and Finance Committee working with the school board to make sure that doesn't happen. And then two, I'm also determined with all of these projects coming online with the West End project that we can ultimately reduce that tax rate, at least on the property tax side, because of all of the revenue coming in from some of those other projects. So I'm hopeful, regardless of the impending doom, the recession, which is certainly overdue, not to be alarmist, but I am still determined that with some of these projects in the pipeline that we'll have that opportunity to do that. But to the last question that I have for you, Ms. Bawa, you had mentioned that the National League of Cities, is that what it was? Yeah. Has there been any conversation, because when I think about what could potentially be our black swan event that sends us into the downturn, when I think about some of the tariff discussions with China, has there been any discussion, and not that we have to go through this exercise of calculating the impact of additional tariffs on Chinese goods and then reciprocation on the $150 billion that we're exporting to China. Has there been any discussion on the potential impact of a tariff and trade war on cities and businesses, especially in jurisdictions of our size? Is anybody talking about that at the National League of Cities?
I've not heard of it so far, but there is a larger conference summit, the fiscal summit in New York that I'm going to, and that's going to be better attended from cities across the nation. This was just more regional.
Okay.
So hopefully, I'm sure it's.
Yeah, I mean, the concern I have, because we asked the question about BPOL and personal property tax, and personal property tax specifically for equipment, machinery, things that people buy for businesses. I mean, those are directly impacted based on price increases on goods coming in. So I'd be curious to know if there is amped up discussion, not that we want to get the cart before the horse, but I don't see any respite from some of the rhetoric that's out there, and get concerned that could be what triggers it. But I'd be curious if people are talking about that in other cities of our size and how that might impact us acutely. So anyway, thanks.
The regional discussion is more around the debt, the federal government debt, those kind of things. But I'm sure it's going to come up at the larger.
Yeah, so to respond to a couple comments, I think would be very helpful on some of these charts, and I think you did it on one, but to go back to the financial crisis and show actually what happened to our tax revenues during that period of time. I think that's a very useful exercise to engage in, so we can illustrate when things turn bad, how bad can they get? And we actually did better than a lot of jurisdictions did during that period, if I remember, as tough as it was, and we were around then. So Wyatt, it's tough to manage through. So that would be point number one. Point number two on tariffs, I think we've raised that before, and you're absolutely right. The cost of lumber, for example, has gone up 50% in some cases. The cost of cars, auto repair parts, virtually everything, consumer items, construction materials, virtually everything at this point is subject to increases as a result of tariffs, except the few things that are produced here in the U.S. So I think the impact is significant. I couldn't agree with you more, and we need to, I think, as municipalities, get a handle on it. Finally, there's some interesting work being done about the vulnerability of cities to natural catastrophes, particularly major ones, and I think we'll see that play out, regrettably, in North Carolina and South Carolina. So another point that I think bears some interesting look is how prepared are we for a major natural catastrophe in terms of it hitting the city infrastructure, and how well insured and otherwise protected are we? What sort of a gap do we have in that area, I think is worthwhile taking a look at as well. And there'll be a presentation I'll forward to you before the Treasury Department exactly on that topic. A couple other things to keep in mind. Thanks.
And news that people know that might make them happy, school enrollment is down this year, and that's significant. I can't remember when that last happened, and so just talking to somebody at the Fall Festival Saturday is concerned, we're building all these apartments and towns are getting flooded with kids. I think there's just a general lack of awareness in the community that, and we keep working on this all the time, that the newer mixed-use developments are not generating kids, et cetera, et cetera. I'm sure it's a trend that won't sustain itself, but this year, we have 25 fewer kids in the school system than we had last year. So, again, the strategy that we're pursuing is working. We're building buildings that are generating revenue and not a lot of additional public service costs. And that's something that I hope we all keep in mind and evangelize about.
All right. If there's nothing else, why don't we conclude this discussion? Thank you very much for your fine presentation. We look forward to hearing from you in the coming months. I'm sure there'll be lots to talk about. Before we go into closed session, is there anything either on scheduling or council comments that people want to say at this point? We do have a closed session afterwards. Okay, if not, thank you all, both of you, the public here tonight. And we're going to go into closed session. Why don't we take a 5-minute break till we can get the camera equipment down?
Mayor, can you do the motion before we go into break
Sure.
so it's on the camera?
Sure.
Thank you.
All right. Upon a motion made by councilperson
Connolly.
Connolly. All right. And seconded by councilperson.
Litgenhouse.
All right. And passed by a voice vote of the City Council. Council went in a closed session pursuant to Virginia Code Section 2.2-3711A28 for discussion or consideration of information subject to the exclusion in Subdivision 11 of Virginia Code Section 2.2-3705.6. We're making such information public prior to entering into an interim or comprehensive agreement will adversely affect the financial interest or bargaining position of the public entity. Councilman Tartar, yes. Connolly?
Yes.
Yes. Oh, sorry. I'm
Duncan?
supposed to be after her. Yes.
Hardy?
Yes.
Lichtenhouse?
Yes.
Snyder?
Yeah.
Tartar? Oh, I've already done it. Me, yeah. See?
Yeah.
All right. All right, let's take a 5-minute break and clear out the camera equipment and go back into town here. Person
Duncan.
Duncan. And passed by a vote of City Council. The City Council reconvened in open session. Council member Tartar, yes. Connolly?
Yes.
Duncan?
Yes.
Hardy?
Yes.
Lichtenhouse?
Yes.
Snyder?
Yeah.
Z?
Yes.
Okay. It's now 9:36. upon a motion made by
Litkenhouse.
thank you, and seconded by Council Member
Duncan?
Duncan, all right. And passed upon affirmative roll call vote in open session, it was certified that only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements and only such public business matters as were identified in the motion by which the closed meeting was convened were heard, discussed, or considered in the closed session or meeting by the city council. Tartar, yes. Connolly?
Yes.
Duncan?
Yes.
Hardy?
Yes.
Lichtenhouse?
Yes.
Snyder?
Yeah.
Z?
Yes.
Yep. All right. Anything else to talk about tonight?
Let's adjourn, Mayor.
Let's do it. All right. We're adjourned.